Welcome to the Crosshair Exploration Mining presentation at the AGORACOM Online Gold and Commodities Conference. My name is Evelyn Cox, and I'm the Vice President of Corporate Development for Crosshair. I will be presenting our company to you today, as well as answering questions posted by those of you who are watching the presentation at our scheduled time. If you're watching this presentation outside of our scheduled time, please post your questions, as we'll be checking over the next couple days to answer them. Before I begin, I would ask that all of you take a note of our disclaimer, which you can review at any time by coming back to this slide. We control a gold project in Newfoundland with a resource that is expandable. We've planned a drilling and bulk sampling program for next year that I'll talk more about later. We also control an advanced uranium project in Wyoming, where we have a resource that contains enough uranium to go into production and that is also expandable and has a timeline to production. We control a large land package in Labrador, Canada, with multiple uranium and vanadium deposits. And lastly, we have an NYSE Amex and senior TSX listing and a great team with both exploration and mining experience. Here is our team. It is led by Mark Morabito, who has a background in corporate finance and securities law. Stuart Wallace is the president and a geologist with over 40 years' experience. He worked several years for RPA and carried out due diligence on numerous uranium projects throughout the world. I'll just mention one of our directors. Derek Gill was Executive Vice President and a Director of Voisey's Bay Nickel Company. He was the Chief Negotiator and therefore directly responsible for Voisey's Bay Nickel reaching an agreement with the Nunavut government, which is the same group that declared a 3-year moratorium on mining and milling uranium on their land in Labrador. I'll come back to Rick and the developments in Labrador later in more detail. Here's just a bit of information on uranium as well as vanadium. Uranium is a simple supply and demand story. Currently, about 16% of the world's electricity is generated through nuclear power. Global demand for power is anticipated to double in less than 25 years. And yes, this demand could be met by burning coal and other fossil fuels. But with the global push to reduce greenhouse gases, uranium is fast emerging as the key generating source to meet future demands for continuous, clean, safe, and reliable electricity without global warming impacts. Even today, the amount of uranium being mined doesn't meet current reactor requirements. Mine production accounts for less than 60% of supply, and the balance is being made up of inventories that are quickly diminishing. Vanadium has been in the news a lot in recent weeks for its potential in batteries. It is currently used as an alloying element for steel and titanium, very much like molybdenum. But with advances in technology, the vanadium redox battery has the potential for large-scale power grid usage. This slide shows our stock chart for the last year as well as our share structure. One important thing to note here is our average daily volume for the last 3 months. We have been and remain quite a liquid stock. There are 3 divisions within Crosshair. The Gemini Metals division was slated to be spun out into a new company as a dividend to shareholders, and everything was in place, including all approvals, but then the markets turned and it didn't make sense anymore to spin it out. This division contains our gold and VHMS projects in Newfoundland. The Target division contains the Boot Heel and Buck Point uranium projects in Wyoming that we obtained through the merger of Crosshair and Target earlier this year. And lastly, the CMB division, or Central Mineral Belt division, contains our uranium and vanadium projects in central Labrador. Our next slide contains a map of Newfoundland and the location of our Gemini Metals projects. These projects were the first set of projects acquired by Crosshair because of the ease of doing work in this part of the world. If you look on the map, you can see that the highway touches the northern portion of our Gold and Promise property. There are also 2 operating gold mills in Newfoundland within a couple hours' drive of our property. This is really important, especially since we have a bulk sampling program planned. We've talked to both of the mills, and both are able to process our bulk sample for us. This is just a more detailed map showing our 3 projects. Golden Promise and South Golden Promise to the north consist of gold-bearing quartz veins, and Victoria Lake to the south currently consists of stringer zones that indicate a potentially massive sulfide system. You can see that the area contains several other deposits, including Tex Duck Pond Mine. The Jacqueline Main Zone is the most advanced zone on the Golden Promise property and has a currently defined NI 43-101 resource of approximately 90,000 ounces. The zone has been intersected for 800 meters along strike and to a depth of 275 meters and is open for expansion. If you look at some of the grades to the right of the map, you'll see that they're really high but over short distances, and that's because this is a very nuggety deposit. These types of deposits are commonly estimated to have lower grades than they really have, and the bulk sample will give a much more accurate grade. Simply by carrying out the bulk sample, we should be able to significantly increase our resource. A lot of these deposits around the world never get developed because the bulk sample is so expensive, but luckily in our case it's relatively cheap. We can just drive the truck up to the property on the highway, fill up the back, and then take it to one of the two mills to the north. Here's a cross-section through our Jacqueline main zone. Our planned program at the Golden Promise consists not only of bulk sampling, but also further drilling in order to expand the zone. We're currently getting all our permits together in order to carry out this $3 million program. This slide shows the land that we control in Labrador and all our currently defined resources. If you add them all up, we control just over 17 million pounds of uranium and just over 27 million pounds of vanadium. Although our resources fall outside of the Labrador Inuit lands and are therefore not directly affected by the moratorium, the market sentiment towards uranium in Labrador has not allowed us to carry out any significant work on these properties until the moratorium gets lifted. The moratorium is set to expire in April 2011. But as I previously mentioned, one of our directors has a very good relationship with the Nunetsivit, and we've been hearing some really exciting news. The Nunetsivit government put the moratorium in place in order to give themselves time to develop and adopt an applicable mining policy, and it sounds like they're ahead of schedule. They may be able to lift the moratorium in June or July of this coming year. We'll obviously have to wait and see, but from what we've been hearing, there's a good chance of the moratorium coming off early. Even if it doesn't come off early, all of our resources are in good standing for several years, which means that we don't have to do any work in Labrador in order to keep that ground. In the meantime, we'll be focusing on the vanadium component of our deposits, especially since we believe that vanadium will become more and more important in the future. Because our focus until recently was uranium, we didn't sample most of our core for vanadium, and the vanadium resource of 27 million pounds is actually only the vanadium that is held within our uranium resource. I know it's a little bit complicated, so the best way to explain this is to look at the cross-section on this slide that shows hole ML181, which is the one to the right, which assayed 0.168% vanadium over 219 meters. Less than 20 meters of this hole was actually used for the vanadium resource. So it's easy to see that our resource is in fact much larger. Our vanadium program, which will be starting any day now, will consist of sampling our own core and then updating our resource. Without having to spend any more money on drilling, we should be able to double our vanadium resource. Results from this program should start coming in around the middle of January and continue every couple weeks until all the holes that are needed are done. On to our projects in the U.S. Our Boot Heel project is located in uranium mining-friendly Wyoming. Wyoming has produced almost 200 million pounds of uranium so far, and there is a mine currently in production and several more at the permitting stage. These are all in-situ recovery or ISR deposits. I would just like to take a minute here to explain what ISR is and what the benefits are. ISR is an environmentally friendly process of extracting uranium. Rather than having an open pit or an underground system of shafts, all you need is to drill a few wells in order to pump in groundwater enriched with oxygen and, if needed, sodium bicarbonate. In addition to the obvious environmental benefits, ISR deposits require much lower capital and operating costs than conventional mines. I'll show you those shortly. The mine can go into production with as little as 3 million pounds in the ground. It can be constructed much quicker, and the grade can be a lot lower since the capital and operating costs are lower. Our last drill program achieved both of our goals. We confirmed the historic drill results and also expanded the zones of known mineralization. We carried out an NI 43-101 resource estimate, which outlines a total of 4.34 million pounds of uranium. This is above the minimum mining threshold for this part of the world, and we're not done yet. Less than 60% of the historic resource area was included in the resource, so the balance is still open for capture. This slide compares some of those projects that were shown earlier on the map and shows the pounds, capital costs, operating costs, etc. So capital costs average about $40 million, whereas conventional mines are in the hundreds of millions. and operating costs average about $23 per pound. Although we're already within the range of millions of pounds, once we complete our next 50,000-foot drill program and capture the rest of the historic resource, we will be one of the largest deposits in the area. I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation that this project is slated for near-term production, and here is our timeline. If everything goes according to plan, we will be producing uranium in about 4 years. This slide has our contact information, and this concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank all of you for joining me and encourage all of you to take this opportunity and post any questions you may have about the company. For those of you who are watching this presentation at its scheduled time, please begin posting your questions now. And for those of you watching this presentation outside of our scheduled times, please post your questions now and check back later for my responses. Thank you.